What we doing, folks? Your host Moose here on the Season 5 Conference Championship Review and College Football Playoff Preview episode, where we'll reveal the teams that make the college football playoff here in the 2020 college football season of our Pitt Panthers dynasty. Of course, your Pitt Panthers coming off of a dramatic victory over Clemson in the ACC title game, a 14-point fourth quarter punctuated by 2 Jay Keys touchdowns and a Damian Vector interception, sealing the victory for the Panthers 24-17 over the Tigers, a 12-1 season, and a likely berth in the college football playoff. But we'll have to wait and see how things shake out on that front. For the Panthers, it was a great game. The defense very, very solid. 88 rushing yards against 170 passing yards. They did well against Clemson on third downs, 4 for 11. Just a solid game. The offense wasn't spectacular, but they got the job done when they needed to. High 300 yardage, good passing yards. The running game came alive with C.J. London having a nice performance, especially in the fourth quarter. It was a very good game for the Panthers. Kenny Pickett, the quarterback rating's tough for him, I guess, because he had not that many yards on a good number of attempts, but I don't know why his rating's only like 126. A good quarterback rating in college is like 150. He had 2 touchdowns, 226 yards, no interceptions. I don't know. I think that rating should be higher, but solid performance from Kenny. C.J. London had 103 yards on the ground, so he did hit the 100-yard mark. Very solid workman-like performance from him. Jay Keys, of course, 2 carries, but one of them got into the end zone, was the deciding score for the Panthers to claim victory here in Charlotte, North Carolina. Great game for him. And the Panthers, 1 and 2 guys receiving the football, made plays yet again. The Garden State speedster Paul Lee, 7 catches for 72 yards. Jay Keys, of course, the super soft, 7 catches for 64 yards and a touchdown. He did have 3 drops, as did KJ Welsh, had 2. KJ Welsh's, though, were bad drops. He had a touchdown, of course, made up for with a great seam route that went for a touchdown, but he had a bubble screen that got dropped that should have been a touchdown. He also had like a 40-yard catch that should have occurred for a touchdown as well, or for a first down that he dropped. Jay Keys' drops were mainly in contact. Great blocking for the Panthers. You saw Cameron Porter and Michael Collins, 4 and 3 pancakes alike. Did give up a couple of sacks, but still great games. Defensively, Jacob Lachlan led the way with 8 tackles. Jason Jordan, though, was a forced 3 tackles for a loss. Ronnie Baker, Scott Whaley, Darren Toth, Jason Jordan, all with a sack. We said Jordan was a fantastic player in this one. Of course, Damian Vector had the interception that helped decide the game, with the Panthers leading by 7 in the final quarter. He made the interception. Clemson never got the football back, and Pitt came away with the victory. Great game punting the football for Eric Fox as well. 2 punts inside the 20. Look at that net. He only gave up like 4 yards on returns. Incredible game for him. Really solid day for the Panthers on special teams, as Jay Bump made a field goal as well. Zarek Cooper was good for Clemson. He missed on a couple of deep throws, had some good chances there. He ran the football okay, but of course the pressure from the Panthers eventually contributed to his negative rushing yards. Anthony Riggs ran the ball well, almost 6 yards a carry. DeAndre Overton showed why he's an All-American receiver. 6 catches, a touchdown, 81 yards. Fantastic game for him, but they just didn't find a ton of options otherwise. Craig Petty was good out of the slot, had a rushing touchdown as well, had a nice game. Defensively, Isaiah Simmons was very good. McDaniel was good. Matt Townsend, their number 1 defensive end, impact player, had a couple of sacks, was a solid player. Clemson was very good, and that's why it was such a great game. I know in the reaction to some of the game footage, you guys said that it was one of the most intense games of the entire series, and I think I completely agree with that. It was just a great game of football, and we're lucky to come with the victory. It's our second ACC championship over Clemson. They had beaten us once, so we win kind of the series there, if you want to consider it that. As we look around the country, though, Rice beat up on Middle Tennessee State, 56 points. Sam Glaceman, their quarterback, accounted for 8 total touchdowns, every touchdown either passing or rushing. Great game for him. Bama pretty methodically knocked off South Carolina. Very big game from running back Josh Jacobs, and a solid game from De'Aaron King as they shut down Rico Dowdell and the Gamecocks. New Mexico ran all over Fresno State, 300-plus rushing yards as they knocked off a very solid Bulldogs team, dropped them to 10-3 to win the Mountain West. Penn State knocked off Wisconsin 35-19. Simple win. Jake Zembiak with a good game for the Nittany Lions in that one. And then UCLA pulls the upset in the Pac-12 championship game. Huge performance from Dorian Thompson-Robinson. Fantastic game for him to beat Victor Viramontes and Cal. UCLA actually scored the last 21 points or 20 points, I should say. They were down 38-35 going into the fourth quarter. They ended up, at one point in the fourth quarter, they scored 21 straight and ended up coming away with the 55-38 victory to claim the Pac-12 title and shake things up going into the playoff picture. And then finally, Miami of Ohio beats Western Michigan to win the MAC. I like to give some great shout-outs to the guys that had big performances when the games really mattered. So Cody Doyle, Player of the Week for Miami of Ohio, interception in the victory over Western Michigan. Sam Glazeman, like I mentioned, 400 total yards, 7 passing touchdowns, and a rushing touchdown in the victory over Middle Tennessee State. The Rice senior quarterback certainly going out with a bang with his performance in that one. In the ACC, of course, Kenny Pickett recognized as the offensive player of the game in the ACC title game. Damian Vector, defensive player of the game with his game-winning interception. Brennan Cleveland, 2 sacks for Penn State in their victory over Wisconsin. Jake Zembiak, 3 touchdowns and almost 300 yards of offense in the victory for the senior quarterback to earn Offensive Player of the Week honors in the Big Ten. In the Conference USA Championship game, of course, Glazeman we already mentioned, then senior defensive tackle Ryan Edwards had a sack and 3 tackles for a loss to get Defensive Player of the Game honors. In the MAC, Cody Doyle, like we mentioned, and Nate Rivera, 120 yards, 2 touchdowns. Mountain West saw Kentrail Moran, 160 yards and 3 touchdowns. Chris Gatewood with a pair of sacks for New Mexico in their victory over Fresno State. Of course, we'll go down to the Pac-12. David Newby had a sack and a couple of tackles for loss for UCLA, and Dorian Thompson-Robinson, look at this game, 346 yards passing, 160 yards rushing, including a 78-yard touchdown run that provided the difference in the game. Fantastic performance for him. Josh Jacobs with a great game, 150 yards and 3 touchdowns for Bama in their victory over South Carolina. And going back to Thompson-Robinson, his performance ends up winning him the Heisman. A great season, no doubt, but a 6-touchdown, 500-yard performance in the Pac-12 championship game to give UCLA the Pac-12 title, knock off number 5 Cal, and Dorian Thompson-Robinson wins in a fairly close race over Artavis Pierce. Only wins by 303 points. Had more first-place votes is really what gave it to him. So Thompson-Robinson, incredible season. Don't want to rule out Artavis Pierce, Brennan Wooten, Derek King, or Jawan Pass, though. But you look at Thompson-Robinson's stats. You look at his final game. 506 yards, 6 total touchdowns. He did have 2 interceptions in the game, but still incredible performance to give UCLA the victory in the Pac-12 championship game. Artavis Pierce, though, season that is not to be snuffed at, and we'll take a look at their stats here just to show you guys some of the top players around the country, just because it's so much fun to look at. 42 touchdowns against 5 interceptions for Thompson-Robinson, 3,700 yards passing, 284 yards a game, 65% completion percentage. Look at his QB rating, almost 200. I wish Kenny Pickett's was somewhere up near there, but Kenny's got a chance to play potentially for a national title. Thompson-Robinson does not have that, so we do have that at least. 700 yards rushing and 6 touchdowns as well for Thompson-Robinson, so he proved that he was a solid dual threat, even though he was, passed the ball more than some of the other running quarterbacks that we've seen in the running for the Heisman do. Artavis Pierce, though, the closest a halfback's come to winning since I think Mark Ingram or Derrick Henry, the last guys to win the Heisman as a running back. Over 1,400 yards, 24 touchdowns, which is what's even more incredible. Plus, he added 2 touchdowns receiving as well. He did get some hardware. Best running back in the country, no doubt about that. And he finished his second in the Heisman. Brennan Wooten, the TCU senior quarterback, 38 TDs against just 2 interceptions. Didn't have as many yards as Thompson-Robinson did. He was a little bit more efficient. He did run a bit more, 62 yards a game and 8 rushing touchdowns, so a bit more running sacks for Wooten, but he just couldn't compete to the touchdown count of Thompson-Robinson. Derek King ended up 4th in the Heisman voting. The transfer from Houston came to Bama this year and had an incredible year. 42 touchdowns against 5 interceptions for him, 5 rushing touchdowns as well. So similar stats to Dorian Thompson-Robinson in terms of touchdowns, but he didn't have near the yardage, 240 yards passing a game versus like 280, and he didn't run for nearly as many yards either, even though he does have that ability. Jawan Pass finished 5th. Good season for him as well. Second year as a starter, 30 touchdowns against 3 ints, 9 rushing touchdowns as well. Very, very complete player. Led Louisville to a 10-2 season. Like I said, he's like Lamar Jackson light for the Cardinals this year, and they're going to be into a very good bowl, no doubt about it, this season. But the big thing to pay attention to after this week, how did the polls shake out? You can see the coaches poll, it didn't move as much as I expected it to based on the way the final week shook out. Clemson dropped 3 spots with their loss to us. Pitt jumped up to number 3. But then you have Washington at 4. West Virginia 11-1. They sit at number 8. I think that's why we don't go with the polls that the game does. But it is interesting to look at them. UCLA beat number 5 Cal, who fell back to 10. UCLA only went up to 16. There's a bunch of 3-loss teams ahead of them. I find it very interesting. And Penn State didn't even move despite winning their conference title. Now, if we look at the BCS, how it would have shaken out if the in-game BCS was allowed to pick the playoff, it'd be Bama, Houston, Pitt, and Washington. But that is not going to be the case. You guys did let me know in the comments who you thought should be in the playoff. Of course, those were contingent on the outcomes of some of the games, because we're going to take a look at where the college football playoff stood just a couple of weeks ago. Bama was 1, Clemson was 2, but they of course have lost. Houston did finish undefeated, and Pitt finished 12-1. Cal, who was number 5, lost, finished 11-2. West Virginia 11-1. TCU 9-3. Texas 10-2. And so because of that, the college football playoff will be full of storylines. The backyard brawl is back. It wasn't slated to be renewed until what would have been season 7 in this dynasty. The 2022 season is when Pitt, West Virginia will be coming back in the regular season. It'll be the season opener of season 7. But before that, we have a season 5 backyard brawl, Pitt, West Virginia, for the right to go to the college football national championship game. It's going to be incredible. It's going to be a ridiculous matchup. It's in the Rose Bowl, which would be really fun, because the 2 semifinals, of course, this year are the Rose Bowl and the Sugar Bowl. Alabama, as the 1 seed, is going to, of course, get the bowl that's much closer to their home base. And it's going to make things very interesting, because Bama and Houston, they're probably equidistant from there. And take a look at the storylines. Not only do we have the backyard brawl in the Rose Bowl, of all places, to renew a matchup that hasn't been played since 2011, but we have Bama with De'Aaron King at quarterback, who transferred away from, you guessed it, Houston this past offseason as a grad transfer. He went to Bama. They needed a senior quarterback, so they didn't have to start a freshman. They got De'Aaron King, the most sought-after transfer in the country. He led them to an undefeated season, number 1 seed. And they're playing his former team, also unbeaten, Houston. Of course, they came out of the American. They didn't play a conference championship game. They didn't have the strength of schedule. They were very convincing this season in that they won their games very, very well. They scored a lot of points. They had a good defense, but they didn't play anybody. Their best victories were against a couple of teams that were 8-4. I think they only beat 2 teams with records over 6-6. So they just didn't have a great strength of schedule. That didn't help them out. We saw what happened the last time a group of 5 team was in the playoff, although this Houston team does seem to be better than UAB from last year, of course, losing to LSU. But it's going to make things very, very interesting. So you got Bama playing Houston, Pitt playing West Virginia. You can see the other bowls around the country. Of course, feel free to pause it if you're interested in a particular school to see who might be bowling, who might they be facing. Now, I did have to do some editing because we made the New Year's 6. We will have the New Year's 6 bowl games, which means the Peach Bowl, which is going to be Washington versus Louisville. I mentioned Louisville was going to have a very good bowl. They're in the Peach Bowl taking on Washington, so that's going to be a great matchup. In the Rose Bowl, of course, we have West Virginia versus Pitt, which of course is a New Year's 6 game and is part of the college football playoff. The Fiesta Bowl is where we move the typical Rose Bowl game, so it'll be Penn State as the Big Ten champion versus UCLA, the Pac-12 champion. Sugar Bowl will be Houston versus Bama. The Orange Bowl, another New Year's 6 game, will have Ole Miss versus Clemson in Miami, which should be a lot of fun. And then Cal, after losing the Pac-12 championship, will be in the Cotton Bowl, the final New Year's 6 game, taking on Texas. So that should be a great matchup as well. A couple of really interesting games. It should be a lot of fun. Another bowl game interesting to look at. UAB, of course, who was in the playoff last year. They got Kyle Trask, the transfer from Florida at quarterback. They'll be taking on Arkansas State, who missed out on the New Year's 6 because of the fact that Houston was in the New Year's 6 as the best group of 5 team. But Arkansas State 11-1 again this season. will be taking on UAB in the New Orleans Bowl. That should be a great matchup, one to really keep an eye on. Some other big games around the country. You can see Navy at 9-2 take on Arizona State. You got Texas A&M facing off with TCU in the Alamo Bowl. This is going to be an incredible matchup. Two teams that are Texas rivals, but don't play each other, of course, because they're not in the same conference. Not too far down the road from each other, but Texas A&M against TCU. Former Pitt coordinator Matt Canada, actually the head coach of Texas A&M right now, so it'll be interesting to see how that matchup goes. Music City Bowl will have Auburn versus NC State. That'll be a fun one, as well as the Buffalo Wild Wings Bowl, seeing Michigan, who just snuck in there with their victory over Ohio State in the final week to become bowl eligible. Of course, we talked about the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl, Washington versus Louisville. It's Jawan Pass and his incredible offense, number 4 total offense in the country. Louisville's also been very good defensively, number 8 defense in the country, going up against a Washington team that's very talented, but they just, their stats are solid. They're very solid across the board. Of course, they lost 2 Pac-12 games. They were the 2018 national champions, and now they're going to go against a very talented Louisville squad with a high-octane offense. I think Washington's kind of the methodical choice. Louisville's the explosive choice. Should be a great matchup. Last year's national champion, LSU, will be in the Gator Bowl taking on Northwestern. Northwestern, a bit of an upstart this year. They started out the season, I think, 8-1, who looked very good, and then kind of tapered off towards the end of the year. LSU had been very up and down. They're starting a freshman, Kelikolio, the Hawaiian, at quarterback. So it'll be fun to see how he does in the bowl game. Florida will take on Wisconsin. That'll be a fun matchup, good color matchup. Two solid teams. The blue and orange versus the red on the field should look really, really pretty in the Capital One Bowl. Florida's been very good this year as far as team talent's concerned. You got SEC runner-up South Carolina versus Ohio State, who really faltered down the stretch. They looked like they were going to get into the college football playoff once they knocked off Penn State and had an inside track to winning the Big Ten. Lost 2 games down the stretch to Indiana and then to Michigan. They also lost to Rutgers on the season and are 9-3. Penn State, who we mentioned, won the Big Ten over Wisconsin. They'll take on Pac-12 champion UCLA in the Fiesta Bowl. It's the Rose Bowl matchup. It's been moved to the Fiesta Bowl. I like UCLA in this one. Their offense is just incredible. Penn State's been very good this season, but I don't think they have that superstar level talent. They have done a good job forcing turnovers, though, and Thompson Robinson did throw 2 in the Pac-12 championship game, 2 interceptions, so maybe that could plague him again. Of course, the other college football playoff semifinal, the Sugar Bowl, Alabama, number 1 in the country, number 4 scoring offense in the country, will go up against the number 2 scoring offense in the country in Houston, number 1, of course, being UCLA. But Houston, number 1 passing offense in the country. Alabama, fantastic passing defense. So it should be really interesting to see these two teams with so many weapons go up against each other. I see Herb Street picked Houston. Don't go off of that. That's because I had to use the editor to edit the games. He doesn't redo his picks once he sees the new matchups, and so I think likely he would have picked Bama. One interesting thing to look at here real quick, both teams top 5 in the country in turnover differential. Take a look at that. Bama plus 12, Houston plus 11. That could be a huge difference in this game, which team is able to protect the football. Of course, Houston will rely on Bowman Sells, their quarterback. Bama's got so many weapons. They got Yusuf Miller at receiver. They got Josh Jacobs at halfback. Freshman Darion Williams at halfback. Derek King at quarterback. They're going to be very good. Ole Miss, who has incredible levels of talent, will take on Clemson, another really talented team that's probably underachieved this season. Clemson almost got into the playoff, but they have that one loss to Kent State on their resume. Then they won 11 in a row, then lost to Pitt. So they got 2 losses bookended right now. Turnovers have probably been their biggest weakness this season, and Ole Miss at least has a talent level of a team that can punish you for that. So that should be a fun game. The Cotton Bowl, it's tough for Cal. If Cal would have won, they'd have been the 3 seed more than likely and would have been in the college football playoff in the Rose Bowl, very close to home. Instead, because they lost, they now get a different New Year's 6 game where they'll go to the Cotton Bowl and play basically what's a de facto road game against Texas there in Dallas. It's an interesting turn of events for the Golden Bears, but they've been so good this season. Take a look at their juxtaposition, though. Number 7 offense, number 112 defense. That's ridiculous. The fact that they're 11-2 even at this point is incredible when you look at those numbers, but that should be, if nothing else, an explosive game. Mizzou versus Oklahoma, 2 old Big 12 rivals. Of course, Mizzou moved over to the SEC. They'll take on Oklahoma in, I think, what became the Compass Bowl, just because if I had to shift some things around, I think originally that might have been the Cotton Bowl matchup. But 2 good teams, Oklahoma. It'd be interesting to see if they start Taylor Savage, the freshman, against Mizzou rather than Al Dingle, or see if both players get some playing time to see who earns the starting starting job next year. And finally, your Pitt Panthers taking on the West Virginia Mountaineers. The backyard brawl is back in the Rose Bowl, of all places, the granddaddy of them all, for arguably the granddaddy of them all as far as college football rivalry matchups are concerned, in my opinion anyways. Should be a great matchup. West Virginia, number 3 defense in the country. Pitt, number 6 defense in the country. So after all the offensive fireworks you'll remember from last year's college football playoff when Pitt went down to Ohio State in overtime 40-37, we could see a low-scoring one here. West Virginia does have a good offense, as does Pitt, but both teams defensively are very, very good, and it should make for a great matchup. So you can see how these two teams got here, of course. Pitt's only blemish being the loss to Notre Dame, 24-21 at home, partway through the season. Of course, rebounded with 5 straight victories to finish out the campaign and earn the number 2 seed in the playoff. Their best seed, because remember, Pitt previously was the 4 seed and lost to number 1 Washington, and then was the 3 seed before losing to number 2 Ohio State last year. For West Virginia, their only loss came against Texas, 38-17. Tough fashion there, but they've rebounded with some impressive victories. Other than their tight game to Baylor, 38-35, they've been pretty convincing in most of their matchups, and they went through a real gauntlet at the end of the year. Oklahoma State, and TCU all to claim the Big 12 title. For Pitt, leading quarterback Kenny Pickett, the senior, looking to go out on top. He's been very good for the Panthers. Of course, his freshman year came in the bowl game. The loss to Texas A&M nearly led Pitt to a comeback victory there. And he's, interestingly enough, never won a bowl game. Kenny Pickett, fun fact, let's take a look at that. He has lost all 3 of the bowl games he's ever played in. Now, the first one, he doesn't really get the loss because Pitt was already losing by the time he came in, and he ended up scoring 2 touchdowns and nearly leading them back to victory. But they lost that game. It was the Music City Bowl to Texas A&M. His sophomore year, they lose in, I believe it was the Orange Bowl to Washington in the college football playoff. And then last year, he loses in the Fiesta Bowl to Ohio State in the college football playoff. So Kenny Pickett looking for his first ever bowl victory for the Panthers, and he'll get to do it against a slightly depleted West Virginia team. They're missing 2 strong safeties, interestingly enough, Quantrez Knight, as well as Huff, as well as Greg Day, who's normally plays at right tackle for them, but that'll actually help them. Losing their starting right tackle, they actually get a better player playing at right tackle for them. Now, the thing is, when you look at West Virginia's lineup, they don't have any real out-and-out superstars. You can see they have a lot of 80s, a lot of good, solid players and above, but not a lot of talent in the 90s, of course. A kicker, as most teams always seem to have. But beyond that, they don't have a ton of high-level talent. Cody Saunders, the senior quarterback, the one thing to watch out for him, though, good speed. 89 speed, 84 overall. He's a good, solid player. 230 yards passing a game. He protects the football a little bit better than Kenny because he only has 9 interceptions against 28 TDs. Of course, Kenny is 28-14. He doesn't have a great arm, though. 79 throw power. So I think the thing you'll see from the Panthers is they're going to challenge him to beat them over the top. I think you'll see the safeties join the box, try and shut down Martell Pettaway, who's a very good runner, 95 speed. He's a quick player, the redshirt senior from Detroit. He's fast. He can move the football. They're going to try and shut him down, not let Saunders beat him with his legs, as well as their fullback, who's actually their backup running back as well. Not let those guys beat them with their legs and force Saunders to go over the top. William Evans, who I'm talking about here, the senior fullback, very quick for a fullback, 87 speed. He's got a big body, 250. He's basically a power running back. He's run for almost 700 yards this season. He's a solid player, and they like to use them both. What Pitt will try to do, I'm sure, make West Virginia beat them. Now, the thing that stinks for the Mountaineers, unfortunately, look at the speed they have at receiver. Steven Smothers, Sims, Brown. Their top 4 receivers, Jarrett Gray, all have 95 speed or better, including 2 at 96, and Smothers, their number 1 yardage receiver, at 99 speed. So if Saunders could just lob the ball up deep, he might have guys open. They're so fast, but the hard part, of course, is going to be, can he get the ball to them because he doesn't have that arm strength. Steven Smothers leads them in total yardage, while their number 1 receiver has the most catches, Brandon Brown, the junior, who he'll be back next year as well. Thankfully, some of these guys won't be around when Pitt has to host West Virginia in the backyard brawl as it resumes normal operation in 2022. But here in the college football playoff, Pitt's going to have to pay attention to him. David Bishop, solid left tackle. Johnson at left guard is good. And Brandon Brown, take note of him at left guard, 82 overall. He'll likely be starting at right tackle with the injury to their right tackle. Ed Brown, the senior, 94 overall, All-American at right guard. Fantastic player. But with Greg Day out at right tackle, Brandon Brown, the left guard, I'd expect him to start right tackle. Now, I don't know how good his rating is at right tackle, but if he's 82 at guard, he's probably still 81 at tackle, which is an improvement over the guy that they have in there. So in actuality, that's going to be a benefit for them, having Brandon Brown playing at tackle. Now, on defense, same thing. Not a ton of superstars, but good, solid players. Paul Harvey, young player. He's just a sophomore, 80 overall. They do have Reese Donahue on the other end, 85 overall. Solid players, a senior, backed up by Stanford Roberts, the junior from Mount Vernon, Ohio. Good, solid talent, right? Reese Donahue's a good player. Matt Townsend was only 82 overall for Clemson last week, had 2 sacks on us. Their big guy in the middle, though, David Mark, as well as Tim Joseph, 2 big-time West Virginia boys who are just molly-whoppers, who can smoke guys in the middle. They're huge. They're going to clog things up as best they can. Pitt will need to try and get the running game probably going outside the tackles if they want to get some yards. Zach Sandwich, really good outside linebacker. Logan Thymans or Timmons, I'm not sure how you say that, at middle linebacker is a solid player. And Brendan Ferns. I mean, they're linebackers. They don't have a ton of depth behind them, but all 3 of them are high 80s players with good speed, so they should be good out in coverage and make things tough for the Panthers. At corner, 2 good cover corners. They got Nick Miles and they have Adams. Basically the same player, Jaquez Adams and Nick Miles. 93 speed, 88 overall. Those are the guys that are going to be on Paul Lease and are going to be on Jay Keys. If they can find some separation, that's where the Panthers are going to need to shine. And this might be a game where you see KJ Welsh take an increased role in the offense in the slot or as the 4th receiver, because he'll have an advantage over the likes of Dennis Williams or Johnson, who just aren't as high level quality in terms of their coverage ability. Billy Young at free safety, love his game. The Washington, D.C. Sophomore. He's a guy we actually went after for a period of time. I think we ended up signing another safety in that class, which is why we didn't end up bringing in Billy Young. But 88 speed, 82 overall. He's a really, really good player. Just a sophomore. I can imagine by the time he's a senior, it's going to be a real gem. Of course, Knight's going to be out for this game, the strong safety, but Dennis Smith will be starting. 88 speed, 80 overall, the junior. Still a very good player. So like I said, West Virginia's entire starting lineup is good. They're all in the 80s. Couple of high-rated players in there where you might find a lot of speed in their lineup as well. That's the biggest thing you'll notice. Probably the only thing that hurts them with that speed is that their quarterback maybe doesn't have the arm to hurt us deep, but they still have the speed for the receivers to get open. No doubt about that, whether that's 10 yards down the field, 15 yards down the field, or whatever. So let me know in the comments, what do you think of the College Football Playoff Selection Committee's decision? How excited are you for the backyard brawl in the College Football Playoff? Who's going to win? What's the final score going to be? Pitt versus West Virginia? What's the final score going to be in Alabama versus Houston? Who will be playing in the College Football Playoff? So as always, guys, thank you so much for watching. Hail to Pitt, and we'll see you in the backyard brawl in the playoff.